Okay, welcome to this webinar from the Untitled School. Thank you for joining us. My name is Enrique Mendizabal. Some of you are joining us now live. I hope we'll have a nice conversation today. And those who are not able to join us live, you'll be watching this online as a recorded webinar. And I'm sure you'll be able to watch many other recorded webinars we have in this series. So what we try to do in this series is to invite someone who's been working in the field of think tanks or around think tanks and has something interesting, something original, something well thought through to share with us so that we can learn a little bit from them. The way the webinar is going to work, I'm going to ask Dmytro, who's joining us today. Are you in the Ukraine?
Currently, I'm in Germany.
Yes, Dmytro travels around the world, so I'm looking forward to your talk because I think you've probably been collecting experiences from different organizations, different individuals, and enriching your own as you go. So Dmytro's joining us from Germany. He's going to be talking to us about rotational leadership in a think tank network, and I think this is somewhat very interesting for think tanks themselves as well as for networks, because one of the things we've noticed over the last few years is a bit of a trend in co-directors or think tanks joining networks and collaborating with other think tanks, again on a rotational basis. So I'd like to learn more about this, about what this actually means and what it implies for a leader who is often associated with being solely in charge, but in this case, I guess it has to assume that it's not forever and it's not all the time. So the way these webinars work, Dmytro will be sharing with us a brief presentation, and then I will be asking him a few questions. But if anybody who's online would like to ask a question now, you can use the chat box on the side of the Zoom screen to ask a question, and then I'll pass those questions on to Dmytro. I expect this will last in total no more than 45 minutes, so will be short and sweet. Great. So Dmytro, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm glad that you joined this webinar. It's very nice to have this diverse and quite international audience, so we can jointly see the case which I observed personally, and then discuss what does it mean and what can we learn from it. So I will switch from talking to showing you the presentation, and this is how we can proceed. So I'll share you the PowerPoint. Yes, so the leadership in think tanks networks. I mean, why bother? So I would say that in each organization there is a leader, and there is actually a group of leaders. So they work together, they perform some projects, and usually there is hierarchy, like somebody's in charge, somebody's performing tasks. But when these organizations come together, then there is a challenge, like everybody's a leader. How do you deal with that? How do you reach your goals efficiently, effectively, and pertain some democracy, equality? This is a challenge. I mean, different social psychology studies demonstrate that if there is no leader, then nothing is done. If there are too many leaders who can't agree with each other, then we have conflicts, and nothing's done as well. So most efficiently, if there is one leader, or there are leaders who can complement each other. And imagine this on a bigger scale. So what we had in our case was the I have to show you the next slide. So what we have in our case is a coalition which combines actually as much as 90 participants from civil society um, and international organizations and authorities. So these are definitely very diverse public who come from over a dozen of organizations. And these activists, scholars, and politicians, they were actually gradually getting together in a network over half a year. We're discussing the reforms agenda in the field of digital democracy in Ukraine and thinking how can we contribute to policy. And this was kind of a loose web of associations, of partners. But then we had a really focused goal, which really helped us. We had to develop a concept paper and an action plan for development of digital democracy in Ukraine. So this would basically be a roadmap, a government policy. There was a demand for that. So the government committed to do this as part of its Open Government Partnership initiative. So it was one of the 15 government commitments to implement. And you know, that's quite a ambitious endeavor. So you would need intellectual and professional and expert input from different stakeholders. So these people who gathered around their remission package of reforms and their state agency for governance, they actually saw this goal and thought how we can implement this. But to do this effectively, we needed some set of rules. This is why we decided to form a coalition, which would be a kind of institutionalized way of interacting with each other. So I will show you. So basically in December, 15 NGOs and one government agency in charge for digital transformation in Ukraine at the time, they signed this memorandum. It was definitely discussed online, like each word of it mattered. It was quite open, like basically we have the same goal to develop the roadmap, to develop and implement policy for electronic democracy in the country. The best question is, how do you do that in terms of leadership? So I would argue that we combine at least 3 principles of rotational or dynamic, however we call it, leadership. It's coordinational, functional, and territorial principles. So in terms of territory, that's very clear, very material thing. So practically each time we would gather a different location, because that's like hosting place. So an NGO or government organization or a donor would suggest, let's at our office, and we would go there, and of course they host us, and this kind of like more comfortable space for them, but then became comfortable for everybody. Then if we go to the functional thing, that's again pretty clear. We can divide functions, like somebody would take organizational efforts, somebody would write the glossary of key terms, somebody would try to draft some parts of the document, somebody would communicate this, because we need different parts, and every organization or every expert is strong in something, and this is like, you know, win-win situation, right? So everybody is participating, feels that he or she is contributing to the cause, and these tasks are pretty well divided, and this is like definitely on a volunteer basis. And coordinational leadership also means that different people would take initiative, or like launching a meeting, or like taking notes, or maybe doing something else. So at the end, this meant that pretty much every organization and pretty much every expert who was active in this endeavor would contribute in some way. And if we take it a smaller scale, the scale of an individual meeting, which would last like 4 hours, because we're really engaged and we needed to do like a lot of work, like develop a policy in a couple of months. So this means that even at every single meeting, we would kind of swap leadership. So there was like no, so to say, appointed moderator. So people would speak up as they saw some point. Of course, we would agree on agenda, but still there's like, you know, like intuitive feeling like who wants to lead. And this is really a really high level of coordination among participants. When we reached that point of understanding that we would let each other lead without even formalizing this like, you know, like a team, really pretty well coordinated. It took time, but this brought results. For example, show the presentation again. We held public discussions. We needed to make this policy paper really inclusive, really participatory, not only like on expert level, but also on an individual participants level. So we held offline discussions, engaging over 150 participants. We launched an online consultation, online platform, which got over 110 commands. They were processed point by point. Again, this was an immense work, but to keep the principle of equality, we really tried to reach consensus. So the point is, if somebody was against something or was really arguing, as emphasizing his or her point, we would discuss to that point until we reach an agreement, or at least a person says, okay, maybe I haven't told you your opinion, but your argument is stronger. So there was virtually no or really little voting. We didn't need that. We really kind of get a common public opinion, expert opinion in the room or in the group or in online communication. At least in the small expert group, but also in these bigger meetings and discussions. Actually, later we institutionalized this. We made this as part of our cooperation memorandum, so that every new member would stick to these values and these goals and these practices. So the result was that we actually developed and presented this policy to the government, which presented it in its own way, and actually took us half a year with expert discussions, with wider consultations to develop the draft policy, and then it took us less than a year until the policy was actually adopted. And this roadmap adoption actually marked the implementation of the Open Government Partnership initiative commitment by the government. So the way we were working, it was quite productive, as we see from this policy adoption, and it was pretty much democratic and inclusive, as we see from the internal process. And we kept rolling on. Again, as we can see from the further steps, we were regularly getting together and communicating and working on, for example, developing the methodology of a survey, like the state of digital democracy at a local level in the country, on updating the national participatory budgeting, which is still developing and still needs further expert inputs and reconfiguration to make it really nationwide. So it's not that organization is doing something and saying, okay, I'm contributing to the cause. It's about us as network experts, practitioners, doing something together more than we can do individually. And this is what we needed, because if, let's say, a survey is developed by only one NGO, then it might, just stick to one agenda or cover one region participation formats. But we needed like a consensus, at least of the expert community, that we are really measuring their direct digital online participatory process in the country, and everybody would agree that yes, that's the right methodology, that's what's happening, because pretty much everybody is involved in that among participants. And last but not least, what's the current state of this endeavor? So we have relaunched this network of organization, this coalition, at the end of 2018. We had, let's say, over 25 or really committed core activists, and 10 NGOs, one government agency. Now more are joining the initiative. And what we did is we really wrote down these principles which emerged, which we developed as a practice. These were quite informal. Then we said that we, for example, should reach the consensus, that we should have at least 2 co-heading organizations over half a year period. And they should rotate, and they should be not the same organization, but every time different set of NGOs or other entities. So this means that within like less than 3 years, pretty much everybody in the organization would lead the coalition on its own. So everybody would have the experience of pretty formal leadership in this sense, because it requires voting and managing the coordination activities, managing the communication activities over half a year period. And you can see that we have this activity on our webpage, and this is mostly the contribution and work of the co-heading organizations. And again, like this is pretty clear that the more people contribute to the cause, that the more they feel connected, the more they feel the ownership of the whole movement, the more they value this endeavor. So I think it has value and usefulness on many different levels and dimensions. If you really lead each other, lead and kind of head this process. But then you need to have this design and common informal understanding, sharing these values and formal principles. So when new organizations join our network, they see from the meeting how it goes, and then they read the rules, and this kind of becomes internalized, and then we kind of have this institutional sustainability. So this was pretty much the case I wanted to present you as an observer and researcher, and I would welcome your questions, comments, and maybe we can go deeper into these principles of dynamic rotational leadership, of direct participation, and how this connected to think tank activities or wider societal and policy impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Dmytro. That was very interesting. I have a few questions of my own, so I'll ask them before anybody else sends their own. But so just to clarify, so this is a network of organizations. Not all of them are think tanks. Some of them NGOs, and maybe other kinds. The people coming together are the organization's leaders. I assume executive directors or similar, and you have a common goal, right? You have a common objective, and you've got to work on this together. So it's not that one will do the work and the other ones will simply validate or provide inputs. And so you've come up with this interesting concept of rotational leadership, which involves different dimensions: territorial, functional, and coordination. Right? That's my understanding. And over time, you've developed these rules that started rather informally, and then you've kind of tried to formalize them to make sure that this approach is sustainable in the future. And if new organizations join, they understand what the rules are rather than probably change them. So my guess is that in this process, there's been a lot of learning along the way. And can you tell us a little bit about the moments or the instances or things that happened that might have made you feel, oh, this is not going to work? So what are the pitfalls that, what are those stumbling blocks that we should be looking out for if we wanted to try something like this at a network level?
Right, pretty good question. This design, it's about balance. So the problems might happen when this leadership becomes unbalanced, when some is like overtaking leadership and say, okay, I have lots of energy, lots of ideas, and then it might take like a bigger space of the common activities. So it's about like internal decision to be like modest and appreciating of the expertise and role of others, and invite them for more inputs, and step down when you can like do more. So that's like individual decision, individual like value and attitude. Another thing is avoiding the groupthink, the social psychology effect, when people tend to formally agree on something, what they might have like objections to the visually common decision. So then again, it should be like a culture of argument, of discussion, when people feel safe that it's okay to object, to argue, and to disagree. And we mentioned that, so it's fine, because we're discussing like not people, not individuals, but processes, right? And we have the common goal, and the common goal in this activity, it kind of has the higher value than like somebody's ambitions or individual agenda, because it's something which is more, something which goes to the level of the whole society, and that should have the primary goal. So that people object, and we really going to feel like rational, that's the best solution, then we agree with each other. So people also have that courage to agree that the idea was not the best one, that it wasn't perfect. Then they can change opinions. It requires some emotional or intellectual flexibility. That's a different thing.
Yeah, so this, it somehow avoids having the need for a secretariat, right? Because if you have a secretariat, in a way, you hand over that leadership, right? So you say, right, we're not going to make the functional decisions. We're not going to host. We're not going to make coordination. We're going to hire a bunch of people who are going to do that for us on our behalf, and we avoid having to decide who's going to start the meeting next time, or etc. So in this other way, it's really a network functioning. Jenny La asks a question that I think is related to this, to your reference to culture, and she says, in this case, it sounds like a prior commitment to equality, democracy, and openness was key. I have also seen organizations commit to rotational leadership that have social justice or feminist commitments. Do you think it's possible for networks without these kind of commitments to achieve rotational leadership?
I think that any organization with fair societal cause can reach this level of coordination, just like about individual values or participants, or organizations, and how they agree on this format. Of course, it's easier when in your everyday activities you're already promoting these things. So, for example, if you're promoting equality or gender equality in particular, then definitely it's already wired in your brain that you're already doing that. Or if you're fighting for more democratic and participatory society, then definitely you already value that everybody should contribute in some way. Then it's definitely easier. But this means that any organization can internalize these principles as well.
Could I ask the question? I'm Anna Dovbach, Eurasian Harm Reduction Association, and actually we experienced this rotational leadership in one of the consortium, regional consortium, working with the different communities in the advocacy work. But we had two challenges which I wanted to clarify. One was that for consortium we had the budget, and budget could not rotate. Actually, it's come to one a responsible agency who are taking money and then share their parts. And even though it's the coordination budget was rotating together with the leadership, this situation came in 2 years, because we had 1 year rotation. In 2 or 3 years, it came to the position that organizations who took money, we becoming the pushers of the processes and implementation. And for me, that's the key challenge. Even though the ownership is raised and responsibility and all procedures are developed and we are learning from each other, it's very good part of the work. But with the operational part, this responsibility shared, but not in an ideal way.
Thank you.
And one more stuff, it's the time consuming of all of the agreements, because the organizational cultures are so different that we need to bring to have a lot of time and personal meetings to discuss how you are doing this or that. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I turn the question around, Dmytro, slightly and ask you the first point, right? The point about the money not moving around. And I think you make a great point in that who holds the money almost is no longer necessarily a member of the network, you know, because they hold in the money, so they're not in an equal position as everybody else. But this makes me think of the role that funders have, right? So if this network is being funded, or the activities of this network are being funded by a donor, a foundation, and, you know, another agency, then they must have to do things differently, right? Because they're not used to this approach. They're more used to giving money to a single entity that has the leadership and, you know, leads the whole process, than they are to giving money to a group of organizations that are going to be sharing that leadership. So other things that funders can do to address this challenge that Ghana has presented.
Right. So the question of resources and funding. So we had a kind of the advantage that it was pretty much a volunteer endeavor. So the activities of the coalition themselves wasn't part of any funded project for the participants, except maybe for the international organization, but it was like a small portion, or maybe it's part of responsibilities of the government agency, but the rest, they had no grant funding for that. So that gave us more flexibility in doing this and shaping, framing the way we saw fit. So this is definitely closer to a network than to a consortium. But we had some funding for in-kind activities for specific things like regional consultations. And then these funds were allocated for one NGO. But then again, it's kind of functional rotation, you know, they took lead in that thing, and in other organizations took lead in launching free unfunded online consultations. So they invested their money just for the cause of development this moment. And that worked pretty well with definitely a small amount of funding. Regarding the question of why would you engage in that, although it consumes so much time, that's true. That's we would meet like literally every week in the first couple of months just to draft the text. But the point is, what's the added value? The added value is that we can do something more beyond our regular routine activities. You know, if just stuck in the tunnel vision of like project by project work, we would never like do something more. But this is like a strategy for like 4 years, you know, and then action plan for 2 years, and then for another 2 years. That requires really strategic thinking and coordination, because you can't do it on your own. Like no single organization in the government agency really appreciated the input from civil society. So that's kind of more long-term, or at least mid-term advantage that comes from this activity. And then we have an expert community which can say, okay, this is our position. Like we think that e-petitions should go this way, but store budgeting should run this way. And then it has bigger power, because that's not one NGO, but a dozen of organizations having this voice. Some of them are think tanks, some are action tanks, analyzing and implementing things, some are international support projects, some are authorities. So that's definitely stronger message, and like bigger, you know, chance for professional impact in field.
Yeah, exactly. I think all networks are more expensive than one expects to run, but the reason why they work sometimes when they do work is because there's a need for organizations and people coming together, and doing it alone is not going to be your answer. Svetlana asks, if the leadership is diffused, how does it affect long-term projects? How can the optimal rotation period for leadership be estimated? I think this is a question you can ask about leadership in the EU or leadership in any other sort of similar organizations, right? Is a year long enough? Is it 6 months long enough? Is it 2 years long enough? Is it too long? So how do you come up with the right period for each of these leaderships to be assessed?
Right. Well, I suppose that should be linked with the length of a particular project. Well, we had that policy delivered in half a year, and then implemented in another half a year. So that basically led us to the assumption that, okay, maybe that would work that way. But people have like a longer project like national participatory budgeting, which is a year-long initiative undertaking, that maybe would need like a yellow period. Maybe the coalition will revise this document, and maybe an NGO should take into account. Or for example, if an action plan is like for more ambitious goals, 2 or 4 years, yeah, then. But then again, the coalition might lose the momentum of change. So maybe having a leadership, the same fixed leadership for 4 years is too long. Definitely that would be harder with funding, but again, maybe a grant can be divided, like a year with one NGO, another year with a different NGO, and that would definitely fit certain milestones which kind of finish by themselves. That would be like functional rotation. Like somebody develops design, somebody implements, somebody communicates. I mean, why not?
I was muted. Before I think Oksana is agreeing with you and talking about the need for a compromise. But I had a follow-up question on this. So it just feels to me that this rotational leadership would be more useful for long-term projects rather than for short-term projects, because if you wanted to rotate leadership among all the members of a network in a 2-month project, or or a 6-month project, you might end up having people taking on leadership for a week, which is not enough time to get things done, or maybe to learn about the role yourselves. But I guess it depends on the kind of project you're working on. As you say, I actually like the idea of separating leadership in different dimensions, functional, coordination, territorial, because different people can lead even at the same time. Different organizations can lead at the same time. So this addresses some of those challenges. Do you think this could be replicated in some way within within an organization? Do you think some of these lessons might be adopted in an organization?
Yeah, definitely. I love the idea, and I experienced that in a different type of NGO where would rotate every year, like with the rule that new leadership should be different people, different persons from the ones before, and that's why you experience the feeling of commitment on individual level, like right away, because people, okay, that's our responsibility, and then everybody appreciates what's the burden of leadership is. If they've been there, how much time and energy that would take, and that's really beneficial that everybody shares the same experience, and they are in the same boat. I would say that if a project is let's say standard, that maybe like one organization can manage it itself. But if that's something new which hasn't been done yet before and have to experiment, then it's like evolving. It's like living organisms, like a growing tree, and this is why you would need to let different people try to kind of help it grow, because you never know how it look at the end, and this is why you need to experiment. This is kind of sort of bootstrapping or experimental democracy in a way, and that worked pretty well. If you're ready to see that chaos in the process, and you see this kind of self-emerges to then kind of formed result.
It had not occurred to me, but as you were describing this, I got to think that there are a number of think tanks that we work with, a couple of them here in Peru, and many academic-based think tanks where the executive directors and the executive team tends to rotate from among the members of staff or the members of the organization. So they are membership-based organizations. The members are researchers themselves, and every year, every 2 years, they choose their executives, right? The people who are going to lead the organization. They do this through a democratic vote. So the members of the center are voting for their leaders, and from among them, right? And usually there is a rotation implied. Now, one of the main challenges for this is that often, if you choose from within a network, you have to make a trade-off between having the very best people for a particular job, if the job is very technical, and then having that promoting certain values, right? If you choose from within, you're promoting these democratic values, idea of sharing, of collaboration, and you accept that the people taking responsibility for the next 6 months might not be the best ones for that particular task, but that's okay. You're happy to compromise with that. Because the best ones for that particular task might be somebody who's outside of that network, right? So it's someone with a specialism on that network. So, but I think that's a balance, right? So you're choosing a way of working because it's promoting certain values, rather than because it's more efficient or more effective. And if that's what you valued more, then you might choose another approach to leadership. But anyway, so I think it can be applied to organizations. It'd be interesting to share some of these experiences online as well. Do you have any final thoughts, Dmytro, that you want to share with us before we?
Yeah, I would like elaborate on your point and comment that it's really kind of a learning process. Even people might not seem the best for the job, they would like learn it quickly because they're supported by others, and they can always get advice, and they will be balanced by inputs by others. It's like we became professionals by learning by doing,
Yeah.
and then if everybody is like super professional, then it helps because like there's no question like who is the best, because everybody's really really good at that, and they can just changing roles. It's like taking your turn in responsibility, like the radical idea that everybody should perform in the government for some time to to kind of feel to see how it works and appreciate and have like a bigger vision and picture, or at least participate in some kinds of direct democratic activities. And this is what I would like call everybody for, to kind of try to impact policies in your town, in your country, in your like union, like European Union, you know, and see, then analyze what's the best policy, how we can contribute to that. Some people, you know, go from these initiatives to then really go into public offices or changing their societies by social movements. So just trying, experimenting, and then getting knowledge and better performing on the way.
So it reminds me of, and I'll close with this, where it reminds me of a think tank in Indonesia, Semeru, where they had this a pool of researchers divided by level of seniority, and often they encourage and they actually assigned the junior researchers to the team leadership in a project. So they would allow the senior researchers just focus on the intellectual production, but they would be managed by the junior researchers. And the reason was that this would give junior researchers the chance to experiment what it is to manage every once in a while, and this would prepare them for later on, and it would prepare them to deal with and work with different parts of the organization that they wouldn't have had the chance to if they were just being the kind of the junior researchers on a project. So I like your idea of encouraging people to experiment leadership within their organization, whether it's a project level or program level or at the whole organization, or in networks, because that would certainly prepare them for the future if they are, you know, they're going to lead an organization themselves. Anyway, that was very interesting, Dmytro, and we look forward to hearing more about this. And this webinar has been recorded, so if anybody wants to listen to it again, you can. It'll be on our YouTube channel, and I will be sharing your presentation along with that webinar as well. And I'm sure if you have any questions, we can pass them on to you, or you can answer them online. We have a few more webinars coming up this year, and so I encourage people to have a look at our website, sign up to the newsletter, and check them out. All right, that's it from us. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.